Hello and welcome to Stretford, Paddock. This is the news. It is Thursday the 15th of August. We've got loads of news today, of course. There's always loads of news at the minute. We're talking stadium. There's been a big reveal of some of the crucial details of the new stadium in the Daily Mail, looking at potentially the structure of the stadium, how it's going to be sort of a big revenue builder for Manchester United, and exactly what's going to be going on with the location of the new stadium as well. So we're getting into that. Also, Scott McTominay's had a bit of interest from Napoli, and there's a bit of a sort of behind the scenes detail on the Bruno Fernandes contract agreement as well. So we're going to be getting into all of that. Get your thoughts in the comments as well. Good morning, everyone. Santa Notch says we're all cats in here too. Interesting. We're all cats, that's for sure. Kevin Aitchen says morning, Joe. Good morning, Kevin. Let's start with this stadium news then. This is from Mike Keegan in the Daily Mail last night, I believe, updated this morning as well with extra information. So it says, inside Manchester United's 2 billion super stadium master plan, an intimidating red wall of fans, 24/7 money-making complex, and help from a Man City season ticket holder. Single bullet point, Manchester United could spend upwards of £2 billion to build a brand new stadium. And there's some pictures, and we'll get into those in just a second as well. But it says there, who can blame Manchester United for wanting to build a new stadium? Old Trafford has fallen into disrepair. The roof leaks and the famous old ground has become a relic unbefitting of the world's biggest football club. United could opt to redevelop Old Trafford, of course, but should they take the plunge on a new ground, it will be the biggest, most expensive project of its kind Britain has ever seen. Good. There is no alternative to that. There is no option where United go, we're going to make it a little bit smaller than Old Trafford. We're going to make it a little bit less grand than Old Trafford. We're going to make it not as good as Wembley. It's not quite as good as at the Emirates, but it's all right. Of course it has to be the biggest, most expensive and best development of a stadium that England or the UK has ever seen. Ideally, it will be all of those things that Europe has ever seen. Manchester United are the biggest football club, certainly in England, and probably only behind Real Madrid in the world. They need a stadium befitting of that scale and magnitude, and whether that's Old Trafford or, as it looks increasingly likely, it feels like we're all resigned to the idea, and now maybe even excited by the idea of a brand new stadium. I can't imagine they now come out and say, actually, we're going to take Old Trafford as it is to 100,000. We're going to build up the south stand, put the quadrants in at the other end, and fill that out and make it. I don't think that's going to happen. Everything seems to be pointing towards a brand new stadium. Now, in this article here, they talk a lot about, I say details, some of it's slightly murky detail, but it's certainly the most detail we've had of anything so far. So you can see there in the drawings, it says hospitality like Spurs, capacity to rival the new camp, which is around 100,000, more than just football. Again, you're looking at potential space for concerts and maybe even other sports. You see NFL in London, don't you? That could obviously be a thing in Manchester. I think the thing to remember with that is, and with concerts and with all of that, Manchester Airport being nearby is such a big thing as well. With it being, I think, the third biggest airport in the UK behind Gatwick and Stansted, it means that you can get all of these things into Old Trafford, even maybe boxing events, UFC events, anything of that nature. It's a lot easier to do than, let's say, Newcastle built a new stadium, or, even if there's a takeover at Nottingham Forest, for instance, they don't really have the airport of the scale of Manchester Airport that could really, accommodate all of those things. I do think that's a big thing in all of this as well. Like, Manchester is the second biggest city in the UK, and I think United being the biggest football team, that means that they can do all of these things where maybe other places could do one or two of these things. We need to be the biggest and best stadium in the country. I think that goes without saying almost. I mean, I know we've still got the biggest club stadium in the country, but Wembley's bigger. I think United need to, push beyond and above Wembley, personally. It talks about a red wall as well, which is, I think, that sort of single stand, sort of Stretford end, if you will, or the sort of home fans end. I don't even know how you would describe it other than the Stretford end. You see it in Dortmund. I think Spurs have got the same thing, haven't they? Where they've got like a single stand going all the way back. I think that's sort of the modern thing to do. Presumably that's for atmosphere reasons. That's to sort of get a singular feeling. But the Stretford end isn't like that, and I don't think that's lacking anything particularly. But if that's the way we want to do it, then that suits me as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on this. They also talk about the infrastructure around Old Trafford and the land that Manchester United own. So you can see on this graphic here, which is perfect there. United consider their options. The new stadium on the land there. The footprint of that stadium is only about as big as Old Trafford. I think you see there the red sort of image there. If you drag that and put that over the current Old Trafford, they're like the same size. That's a worry for me, because all these new stadiums I go to, the stands aren't as steep. You got more legroom in everything. Like every new stadium I go to, went to SoFi the other week. I've been to the Emirates. I've been to other new stadiums in America as well on the pre-season tours. They've all got way more legroom than Old Trafford has. Like in Old Trafford, my shins are touching the seat in front of me the whole time if I'm sat down. So that means that the gap between each seat has to be bigger. And the concourses are far bigger in a lot of these stadiums. Everything seems bigger. So how are you putting another 25,000 seats in there and it's only taking up the same space as the current one? Obviously, you can go higher, but to get everyone in, you have to go back as well. I don't know. I wonder about all this. And are we going to get a stadium that is sort of the smallest possible version of a 100,000 seater? Maybe on the one hand, that would be great for atmosphere. Because if you look at that number 2 there, the bottom left-hand corner of that new stadium and the top right-hand corner are, one of them's touching, I think, near the canal, and the other's touching the sort of B road that goes across where all the Amazon vans go behind, where you see Stephen Howson doing transfer review. Or is that the canal that side, actually? No, that might be the canal that side. And then the other side's the train line. Okay, so it's squashed between the canal and the train line. Either way, whatever it is, it's sort of penned in. So we can't have this kind of, so far, the footprint of that stadium was like, I don't know, half a kilometre across. It was astonishing from the tip of one end to the tip of the other end. And United don't really have that space. I know we've got space, but that's one thing that I do think. How are you fitting a stadium 25,000 seats bigger than Old Trafford with the new sort of modern scale of everything in that space? I guess obviously they've worked it out and it can be done, but I wonder what that will mean. Whether it'll have to be sort of cut back in terms of concourse size, in terms of the facilities behind the stands, or will it be taller rather than these kind of like sprawling bowls that you see in some of these newer stadiums? Just something to think about. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Santa Notch says, who devised that map layout? Might not be official if that's the newspaper. That's true. I'm pretty sure that's an image, isn't it? It looks... Can you see that a bit better than me? Is that an image? Is that like a sort of drone helicopter satellite shot, Ethan, or does it look like a mock-up? Yeah, it looks to me like a satellite image, so I don't know, maybe the scale of the new stadium is being guessed, obviously, but it looks pretty comparable to Old Trafford, and to me that looks like a satellite image, so we'll have to see. Bravo says, I imagine the architects have thought about the dimensions. I'm sure they have. I'm sure it can be fit there. I'm just thinking, what will that mean? Let's work on the assumption that it fits. Okay, so then it fits within this thing, so we have to fit 100,000 seats in that space. What does that look like? I reckon it could be a good thing. I'm not a big fan of the ability to walk in front of someone else's seat while they're still sat down and them not having to stand up. I think that's too much room. When you go to Wembley, the width of the stairwells, they're like twice as big as Old Trafford, either side of the barrier. So there's a massive gap between each section of fans because the stairwells are too big. Like you can have 4 people either side of the sort of handrail at Wembley, no problem whatsoever. I think that's too big. I don't know if it's a health and safety thing or if it's just a design choice, but I wouldn't mind it being a bit more cramped in. So that atmosphere builds, because if you're sat on the edge of one section, the next section at Wembley is probably 2.5, 3 meters away if you've got a stairwell between you. Too much. You need it squashed. So maybe it'd be a good thing anyway. Lolico says, I hope we don't get a toilet bowl spaceship. Yeah, me, completely. I completely agree with that. That's the one thing I don't like about a lot of these modern stadiums. It's just you get inside, what is it? Big circle. They all look exactly the same. SoFi is cool with that massive screen above your head, but really, you're not there for a screen, are you? I wouldn't mind it having a square sort of finish to it inside to kind of emulate Old Trafford a little bit, rather than these sort of just looping bowls that pretty much everyone seems to have these days. Brian Casey says, Joe, you have to remember that the Current stadium will be downsized, so there'll be more room on the grounds. Well, on that's another thing I wanted to talk about. Sorry, this is just me rambling today. How are they going to downsize it? They're not... Do we really think they're going to take the roof off, knock the top half down, and put the roof back on? That doesn't seem remotely feasible to me. I don't. What do we think they'll take a full end off and put like a smaller stand there? Maybe take the whole north side off and put a single stand that side. Take it down to about 35,000. How do you actually do that? Has anyone ever done this? Let me know in the comments if you know any examples of a stadium being downsized like by more than half. When's that happened before? How are we doing this? Do we really think we're going to just take the lid off, knock the top stand down every side, and then put the lid back on? Do you know what I mean? How is that? I could see, and this is me not knowing anything, almost taking the top tier off, but turning it into something else. So you knock all the seats out, you knock the concourses out of the top two tiers, at the back of the Stretford end, the back of the where the away fans are, and the back of the north stand. Knock all that out. You can put sort of like maybe like windows in there. You could make that be kind of walking space areas with restaurants and all that sort of stuff in. But I don't see how they're going to take all the sides off it and lower it. Is that a thing? Has anyone ever heard of this? I don't even know. I don't know how that works. Trey with a T says World Cup stadiums all over the world have downsized. Okay, cool. I wasn't trying to say it's impossible. It just seems difficult for me to believe. But if you've got an example of one, I would love to look at that, because there's downsizing and then there's taking 45,000 seats out of a 75,000 seater. That seems tricky to me. Limerick lad says that this is a very good point. Thank you for sort of bringing me down a notch. Joe, that's an arbitrarily drawn red rectangle drawn by a Daily Mail employed graphic designer. Why are you discussing it like it's an architect's drawing? On the one hand, you're right. But on the other hand, there is still a canal and a railway to negotiate here. So you can't just move it. There's roads and canals and railways that we are going to be confined by. So whilst that is true, that square there is just a guess. There is a limited amount of space there that looks to be roughly filled by that red square. But yeah, good point, yeah. They'll probably just sort it out, won't they? Ed Fallon says, new stadium needs a roof for concerts, etc. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, get in the comments to let me know. Give me a specific example of a stadium that's been downsized to that scale, because I'd love to just research it as much as anything else. But anyway, let's move on to our next story. It's a big story, that though, the stadium, because this is the home of Manchester United, and it will be the home of Man United for, I don't know, maybe another 100 years. Who knows? It doesn't feel like these new stadiums will be around for 100 years, though, does it? I can't imagine Arsenal playing at the Emirates for another 80 years. Whereas these older stadiums, because they've been built up the way they have, sort of in a modular fashion of new stand at that end, new one at that end, we'll put another top on that, fill the corners in there. That kind of worked. But these sort of pre-built bowl kind of, IKEA flat pack stadiums, there's not a lot of room for manoeuvre there, is there? We'll have to see. Eric Gare says, that's why Joe's on YouTube and not a stadium architect. Couldn't agree more. Matthew Coward says they need to implement the slope off the pitch just like they have in Old Trafford. It's as much as part of our heritage as the Babes. Yeah, that shocking slope that leads to a sharp brick wall around the base of it, which has just hurt no end of players down the years. If you've never been to Old Trafford before, the pitch is probably, I don't know, maybe a metre raised off the I don't know what it's called, the area around the outside of the pitch. It slopes down for about a metre, maybe just under a metre, and then round the base of that slope is just red bricks with sharp edges that footballers slide down and bang their hips and knees and ankles on all the time. And it's always felt a bit dangerous to me, that the idea of having just a brick wall around a drop around the edge of the pitch. Very interesting. Graham Allen says, wouldn't be hard to reroute the canal. Fucking hell. Jesus. That's the most Victorian sentence I've ever read on YouTube, that. We'll just reroute the canal, won't we, boys? Brunel over here. Come on, mate. Reroute the canal. What? That hasn't been done in 170 years. Scott McTominay. Looks like Napoli are interested. This is according to TalkSport. But also I've seen this mentioned elsewhere as well, but Let's get into it. Scott McTominay subject to approach from European giants Napoli as Manchester United set price tag. Are they European giants? They're a big team, aren't they? Would you say the European giants, Ethan? They've won 3 league titles in their history. They're tier 2, aren't they? They're not giants. They're not a giant. Milan, Inter, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juventus. They're the Italian giants for me. Napoli have made an approach to sign Manchester United midfielder Scott McTominay. TalkSport understands the Italian side favour a loan deal, not happening, but United would prefer a permanent departure, where they value McTominay at up to £30 million. The problem here, Napoli, you've shown your hand because you made a bid for Mason Greenwood. So we know you've got a little bit of cash. You can't pretend there isn't 25, 30 million quid knocking about because you wanted Greenwood for that. Do you know what I mean? You've what do they say? You've screwed the pooch on this one. You can't pretend that money isn't there. Erik ten Hag has made bringing a new defensive midfielder a top priority as he looks to provide competition for Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo. I would say partnership with Kobbie Mainoo rather than just competition. And McTominay could be the man to be sacrificed, with any potential sale to be pure profit, with the 27-year-old a product of the club's academy. This makes sense to me, but I don't see why a loan would be helpful to us whatsoever. Unless there's an obligation to buy, and then in that case, can United maybe put that down as earnings for this summer? I don't know, probably not. I don't know how that works. But why would a loan suit United? It's not like we need his wages off the books. He's not on that much by comparison to a lot of the United players. We could do with him as a player if we're not going to get money for him. Like, he's probably the first choice off the bench behind Mainoo and Casemiro as it stands. So why would you get rid of him for no money, essentially? And we'll lose a year of his contract, and he'll go for cheaper next season. I think United have to sell him. If he's going to go, if he's not going to be playing for United this season, United have to sell him. Brian Casey said, I've just seen the future. Antony's winning the Ballon d'Or. Interesting. Soldier 4th class. Why are we reading TalkSport, by the way? Because, weirdly, their presenters and sort of pundits are one thing, but their reporters and their journalism is of, I would say, a higher reliability. It's not, the most reliable source in the world, but it's not the same as Gabby Agbonlahor saying that he'd beat Bruno Fernandes up if he was his teammate. They do have a bit more of a sort of journalistic integrity in their writing side than they do in their punditry and presenting side. So I wouldn't say that it's definitely going to happen, but it wouldn't. I tend to believe that Napoli are interested in Scott McTominay in some way. Whether it happens or not, we'll obviously have to wait and see. CD Razmi says, greetings, Joe. Greetings, CD Razmi. Destino Portugal. Do you think Antony will get 20 goals this season, Joe? Yes, I do, yeah. It's almost certain, isn't it? Everything we've seen from him so far, I think he'll get 20 goals. And by that I mean total career goals for both Ajax and Man United. I think he's on 19. So one more, sorted. Let's move on to our next story then. Bruno Fernandes. We saw last night that he signed a new 2-year extension to his current deal, which takes him up to 2027 with an option for a further year. So as far as United are concerned, we've got him till 2028 if we want him till 2028, which is obviously great. For me, is United's best player, easily, and United's best signing since Robin van Persie. I think he's a fantastic player. And actually, unfortunately for him, he's playing in this team. Because if you'd have put Robin van Persie in this team, he wouldn't have won a league either. Whereas if you'd have put Bruno Fernandes in the 2008 team, in the 2012 team, pretty much any Manchester United team, he'd be playing almost every week and winning trophy after trophy after trophy. He's one of the best attacking midfielders I've ever seen at United. And it's unfortunate for him that he plays in an era where the best he can do is an FA Cup here and there. Because he's brilliant. And his numbers are exceptional and comparable to any Manchester United player in that position in history. So I sort of feel sorry for Bruno Fernandes and grateful for how well he's done and the memories and the happy times that he's brought us as fans. But I wish he'd have got to play under Fergie instead of the era that he's in now, because he deserves a lot more than he has done. He should be walking away with 5 or 6 Premier League titles, this guy. How good he is, how regular he is, how reliable he is, how consistent he's been. I know he's not had 30-goal seasons every year, but he's 10 goals, 10 assists minimum a year. He's the talisman of this team. He puts the team on his back most weeks. And if we win, it's because of him. And if we lose, people blame him as well. I just think he's a phenomenal player, and it's a shame that all he's won so far is, a Europa League, a League Cup. Did he win the Europa League? No, he didn't. A League Cup and an FA Cup. He deserves a lot more than that, and hopefully between now and 2028 he can win a lot more than that. The news here, though, is that he had concrete offers from other clubs to leave Manchester United. Fernandes has signed a 1-year extension, which will keep him at Old Trafford until 2027 with an option for a further year. But the Portugal midfielder has revealed that before making the decision to stay, there was a possibility he could have left this summer. What else we got? This is a vote of confidence from the club was very important for me. Even because I was approached by other clubs, the club was aware that there was a possibility of me leaving. I had concrete offers, but the club showed that it needed me, that it was a time of change and they wanted to do things differently. Made captain by manager Erik ten Hag last summer, the 29-year-old says he's hopeful of adding to his winners' medals in the FA Cup and League Cup following changes made to United's structure under new minority owner Jim Ratcliffe. These things are important as well because it shows that it's not just us as fans who are excited by Ineos and getting a bit of momentum from what Ineos are doing. The likes of Omar Broad, I think he was pictured with Dan Ashworth there and the contract signing as well. The players feel this. The fans feel this. The media feel this. Opposition fans feel this. Like, this is what I'm talking about momentum. We don't know yet. We haven't seen. This season could be a car crash on the pitch for all I know. But little things like this of, there's a future at this club with the changes that are taking place. A dream future at this club. That is momentum of a certain kind. And once the results on the pitch start going a certain way, you can see it. I always talk about Newcastle. But Newcastle, yes, they spent more than they would have if it weren't for their new owners. But that first season when they finished top 4, they overachieved massively. And that wasn't just because they had a team that was the 4th best in England all of a sudden. It was because they had momentum. They had a decent manager in Eddie Howe. They made some shrewd signings, I'll give them that. But a lot of that top 4 was momentum. Look at Aston Villa under Emery. Yeah, he's a very good manager, but he didn't have that momentum at Arsenal. They didn't do very well. But when it starts clicking, he works, and actually Ollie Watkins is playing the best he's ever played, and next thing you know, Aston Villa are finishing in the top 4 spots. If United can have a bit of that momentum behind them, something that we've not only had not any positive momentum for the last 10 years, it's been basically walking through mud for 10 years for these players. If you can start to feel a bit of a weight lifted, and actually, I've got a wind behind me now, it's amazing how quick things can turn around. That's going to be all from me this morning. Thank you very much for joining. We'll be back this afternoon for our Premier League predictions. The season starts tomorrow. Me, Adam McCauley, you get Jay's predictions, Stephen Housen's predictions, and Ronaldo Brown's predictions as well. You can go through them. I mean, will Arsenal be 8th again? They were last season, weren't they? They proved me wrong, but we'll have to see what we go for this season. Thank you very much for joining me. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit like on this if there's less than 500 likes. We'll see you in a bit.